Good morning, theology class. Welcome to the first full week of online school. How are you doing? I know for myself, I'm a bit overwhelmed. Perhaps you are too, or perhaps, I'm not sure, maybe you have so much less work and a bit more discretionary time that you're enjoying this adventure. That being said, you should have watched a little introduction video last week for theology and made a comment on that. It seems like all of you did from what I can tell. So I appreciate you doing that. There was not any work outside of that to do last week, but this week there will be. So let me go over this week's weekly announcements. This will be for Monday, March 30th through April 3rd. So this is what you will need to be doing for the entire week. The first thing will be some reading. You're going to read an excerpt from a book called Every Good Endeavor. You're going to read the introduction. It's by Timothy Keller, and it's pages 18 to 30. I have uploaded a PDF of that to RenWeb under the Documents section. I've got to be honest, I'm not sure what that looks like on your end of RenWeb, but on my end it is under the Documents section for the theology class. I've also attached it, assuming that I can remember to do that, on the weekly email that you will have gotten on Monday morning. So read that, and then you're going to write something somewhat in response to that, but kind of a basic thought. I want you to reflect on that introduction, so you ought to read first, and then write a 1/2-page answer to this question: why do you want to work? Why do you want to work? That sounds like perhaps a very simplistic question, but I want you to think of it at a rather deep level. Perhaps some of you have been assuming that you're going to work after you get done with high school and college, or perhaps before then, or perhaps after then. But at some point, I suspect you've been assuming that you want to work. And I want you to reflect critically and thoughtfully on why that is. Consider the work you want to do after high school, college, and answer honestly and personally. Think purposefully about it before you begin writing. Don't just launch into it. I want you to ponder it. Why do I want to work? In some sense, there's not really a right answer to this question. I'd rather you be honest and give me your most fundamental and basic answer. Why do you want to work? Finally, you go ahead and email that to me by Thursday, April 2nd at 3 p.m. So that'll be this Thursday by 3. You need to email that to me, 1/2 page. Lastly, the video you're watching right now is the only video for the week, and you will leave a 2 to 3 sentence comment at the end of the video. And I'd like for you to do that by Tuesday. So you need to watch this video on either Monday or Tuesday. Now, I suppose if you're watching this on Wednesday, you've already missed the boat. So hopefully you will have caught that in the email. Our subject, if you haven't figured that out and haven't really been paying good attention, is the subject of work. I suspect you have been looking forward to what you're going to do after you're done with school, whatever amount of school you're going to complete. I'm guessing that you've been looking forward to that for quite a long time. Some of you, it seems, have even begun working, or you work for your parents in some fashion, or you perhaps have started a loose small business. Whatever the case, it seems to me that there is this great anticipation in late teenagers, high school students for Doing, by the way, that was the air conditioner vent thingy that was just turning on, if you happen to hear that strange noise in the background. At any rate, seems to me that you all, and I can recall this, we're looking forward to doing that thing that you're interested in, whatever it is, someday. And so I want you to keep that thing on your mind as we consider work. We're essentially going to talk about this subject for the rest of the year. I typically get to some other things in a normal quarter, but for now we're going to do a slow consideration of how work fits into God's design for the world. And I want you to keep your specific interests at the front of your mind as best you can. Here's just a kind of a basic overview of the things we're going to talk about, or the things I'm going to talk about and you're going to consider. I depend very heavily on a book written by Tim Keller. You're reading the introduction to it. It's called Every Good Endeavor, and the subtitle is Connecting Your Work to God's Work. It's essentially about how do I work as a Christian? How does a Christian do work perhaps differently than the unbelieving world? What does it mean to work as a Christian? So that's our basic and broad topic. I hope it will be quite interesting for you because it seems to me to be a very practical and hopefully engaging subject. So today the thing we're going to be considering is what I'm calling the heresies of work, or bad views of work that our culture and sometimes Christians can have toward work. So we're going to consider kind of the ugly backside of work today. And then we're going to talk about the design of work. How did God design work to function in His world? Then we will consider the fact that God has injected work with an incredible dignity without which we cannot live. And then we're going to look at two different kinds of work, or two different aspects of biblical work. The first one is cultivation. This is an echo of Genesis, cultivating the garden. What does it mean to cultivate the earth in our various kinds of work? And then secondly, we're going to look at work as service. What does it mean to serve our fellow man through the work that we do? Then we're going to look at three different ways that work has become broken by the fall. Work becomes fruitless. It doesn't have the output that we want. Work becomes pointless, a mindless drone of things that we do that seem to have no fruitful end in mind. And then finally, work becomes selfish. It becomes about us. Those are three ways that the fall and sin have broken work, and we're going to consider those as well. And then finally, we're going to consider what the gospel, what Jesus has done, that gives us a new story within which we work and a new power that kind of fuels our work. These are essentially chapters out of Keller's book, and I'm going to kind of distill them for you and add some thoughts to invite you into considering what God made you to do, and how a biblical understanding of work will enable you to have a fulfilled life of work, even when work is sometimes very broken. So that's where we're heading, and today we're going to consider the first of these issues, heresies of work. So first, this whole unit works so much better if you were here with me, because it's so practical, and we could talk about all different kinds of aspects of work. That was not a normal pause. That was a sip of tea. First, I want to just kind of reflect for a bit on why exactly do people work? We're ironically in a time right now where a lot of people are not working during the social distancing quarantine days of the coronavirus. But if you could imagine an ordinary time in the world, billions of people get up every day in the world and they leave their houses and they go to work. Why are they doing this? If we were in class, we would have a little 5-minute discussion about this. But for now, consider 3 or 4 different reasons, basic rock bottom reasons why people work. It seems to me one of the most fundamental reasons is to make money. I need to eat. I want to do things. I need to pay my mortgage. I want to have fun in the world. Life takes money. And if I didn't work, generally, I wouldn't make money, and so I would be homeless and would never have any fun. And so it seems to me that one of the most basic reasons why people work is to make money. Now, eventually we're going to think, and we already have thought a little bit in this class, about the role of making money in the life of the Christian. Our Journey of Generosity videos, I think, helped kind of frame a life of money making and how that fits into God's world. It's not evil in and of itself, but I would submit if it becomes the sort of singular and isolated reason why we work, we have gotten off the reservation from a biblical view of work. So first, I suspect this might be at the top of the list. People work to make money. Secondly, this one may be a little bit closer to home for you and me. It's what people do. Do you ever feel that you are just kind of waking up and doing what everybody else seems to be doing right now? That would be going to school. You've been doing this for many years. Eventually you're going to go to college because, that's what people do. And eventually you're going to get a job and go to work, because that's what people do. And perhaps it's easy if you slip into this reason for going to work and it's essentially subconscious. It's easy to wake up when you're 50 years old and wonder, what on earth have I done with my life? It was a mindless, robotic fitting in with what the world is doing. So this seems to me to be another reason people go to work, even though it's rather subconscious. It's what people do. Thirdly, self-actualization. It's a big fancy word, but what this means is a sense of self-fulfillment. There's something in me that is wanting, lacking, unfulfilled, a hole in myself, the deepest part of me that seems to be unsatisfied, and work becomes that place where I achieve and I fill that deepest and most fundamental part of my soul with the great satisfaction that I have done it. I've made it. I am something. That's what we mean by self-actualization. Now, we are going to talk about how we cannot live meaningfully without work, in part because God made us to work. But this point has to do with that deepest part of our souls that was really only made to be satisfied in God. We look to work for our self-actualization and self-fulfillment. Not sure if you heard that, but that was another air conditioner vent coming on. Fourthly, I think people work for reputation. Self-actualization is kind of that internal facing satisfaction, and the reputation is kind of that outward facing satisfaction. It's the thing that will prove to the world and the people I esteem that I am something. We work to prove to the world that we matter. And we can slip into working because we want a certain kind of reputation. Now, all of these, I think, have biblical warrant in some way, but I would submit that when we take these 4 different reasons to work and we turn them into ultimate reasons, we are running against the grain of the way that God has made us to work. And so I want to reflect, or I'm inviting you to reflect critically on one or several of these that you perhaps are kind of setting yourself up to pursue. I think we all kind of run down one or several of these paths as we head into our working life unknowingly, subconsciously. And there may be more, but it seems to me that these are 4 of the most prominent reasons why people work. And if they become ultimate reasons, we will be missing the reason why God made us to work. And we're going to experience a deep and profound sense of angst and unfulfillment if that is the case. Let me suggest just kind of one other talking point, which is consider how some people, you hear this all the time, the concept of a work-life balance. What does that tell you about the role of work in a person's life? A work-life balance. What does that say about work in relation to our purpose for living? It seems to me that it kind of sets up this unhelpful dichotomy between, real life that you want to live, that's worth living, that you desire to pursue, and work. It imagines that work is almost something that we need to survive to get to real life, right? And so consider that as another kind of paradigm that I think is an unhelpful one as we think about why God made work. In a similar fashion, I want to consider what you might call some false views of work, similar to the list that we put forward first. I would call those reasons for work. Here I want to consider what we might call some false views of what work ought to be for us on a daily basis. And consider this view of work from these 2 lovely authors: Why Work Sucks and How to Fix It. No schedules, no meetings, no joke, the simple change that can make your job terrific. There's a certain kind of approach to work that is implicit even in this book title, and that is work is kind of inherently bad, annoying, and we've got to add things to it or take things away from it. We've got to trim the fat from work for it to be satisfying and fulfilling. And I think this leads to, it inevitably assumes, and I think rightly, that work has got things that are unenjoyable. There's something when we enter into work that grates against our souls. But I would submit that the diagnosis is false in leveling the problem at work itself rather than sin's effects on work. And because sin has messed up work and bent work, it means sometimes we end up throwing the baby out with the bathwater, and we call work bad itself. And there are 3 ways that I think we do this. First, we think of work as something to be avoided altogether. I would invite you even to think about these in relation to school for yourself right now, and figure out which one of these is kind of the most meaningful to you or the most tempting to you. This view would say, I would just would just rather be watching Netflix. I just want to get. I'm okay with a D plus, right? If it gets me through high school, essentially the state is making me be here. Work ought to be avoided and avoided at all costs. Some of these actually are quite similar. There's kind of blurry lines between them. The second one, work is to be endured, has a slightly more positive approach to work. It's willing to endure it. But really what we want to get to is what's after the work, right? Work for the weekend kind of concept. And that essentially feeds into the third idea, which is that work is a necessary hindrance that I've got to get through to get to what I really want to do, which is enjoy the weekend, have fun, enjoy life. Retirement is often fits into these last two. I want to get through work. I may even want to work well and hard, but so that I can get to retirement. And so I'm going to do work, but really the work is not the point. The point is getting to a good and comfortable retirement. And often in any given week, we kind of reduce that model to a simple week. We try to get through Monday through Friday so we can get to what we really want to do, which is, the stuff on the weekend. And I'm sure some of us are even experiencing this now as perhaps our work level is reduced. We are getting to do things that we want to do now. Now, I understand that perhaps schoolwork does not always fit into the mold of what it seems you want to do with your life and what God made you to do. But let me suggest that whenever you and I fall into one of these three categories, or perhaps all of them at the same time, we are gutting work of its inherent meaning and significance. God did not make work to be avoided or to be endured or as a necessary hindrance. Now, on the flip side, how would you answer the question, quote, the way to serve God at work is? Keller gets into this in his introduction, so you may have already read this or you will get into it. There are many different kinds of ways to answer this question. And if we were to do this in class, I would probably have us write them on the board and see the varied responses to these questions. Some of these come from Keller. Some of them I think I've made up. But a bunch of different ways to answer this question, to further social justice in the world, to be very honest, right? I'm not going to cheat. I'm going to be an honest person. That's how I serve God at work in the world. To evangelize those that I come in contact with. I'm going to tell people at work about Jesus. To do skillful, excellent work. I'm going to be a good teacher. I'm going to be a good plumber. I'm going to do excellent work in whatever business I do. I'm going to create beauty. This might be a more artistic approach to work. I'm actually going to make things that are good, beautiful, that cause flourishing. I'm going to glorify God and influence the culture. I'm actually going to be a part of making culture into something that honors and glorifies God. I'm going to use my gifts to serve God. This is kind of a journey of generosity approach. I'm going to make lots of money and I'm going to give generously. I'm going to use my gifts to make money and give generously. So consider how varied the approach to work can be as we consider it through the lens of being a Christian. So what we want to do, sorry, I should not have sent you to that page yet. What we want to do in this class is we're going to look at both sides of the coin. We're going to look at some of the ways that work really is broken, and it really does. It really is filled with difficulty and struggle and angst and strife. And we want to understand why that is and what exactly it is that is broken about work. But we do not want to We don't want to throw work itself out, so we're going to consider why God made it, what he made it for, and how he made us to participate in it. I'm going to read a little excerpt from the thing that you were supposed to have read. If you haven't read it, hopefully this will make some sense. Keller says, but really everyone is niggle. If you haven't read that, that will be the strangest thing you may ever have read, but go ahead and read the introduction. It'll make more sense. Everyone imagines accomplishing things, and everyone finds him or herself largely incapable of producing them. He's getting after the angst, the fruitlessness of work. Everyone wants to be successful rather than forgotten, and everyone wants to make a difference in life. But that is beyond the control of any of us. If this life is all there is, then everything will actually burn up in the death of the sun, and no one will even be around to remember anything that has ever happened. Everyone will be forgotten. Nothing we do will make any difference, and all good endeavors, even the best, will come to naught. Unless there is God. If the God of the Bible exists, and there is a true reality beneath and behind this one, and this life is not the only life, then every good endeavor, even the simplest ones, pursued in response to God's calling, can matter forever. That is what the Christian faith promises. In the Lord, your labor is not in vain, writes Paul in the first letter to the Corinthians, chapter 15, verse 58. He was speaking of Christian ministry, but Tolkien's story shows how this can ultimately be true of all work. That's where we're heading in this class for the rest of the year. How can God's calling in my work, my everyday labor, matter forever? That's what I want to explore. And here are three of the things we'll consider in the next 1 or 2 sessions. The first is that work is good. We cannot live without it precisely because God has made us for it and because it is designed by him. God is the inventor of work. It's not something that we simply have to do to get to life itself, but in some sense it is life itself. And therefore, if we're going to live a meaningful, satisfied life as a human being made by God, we need to understand and engage in work in the way that he made us to do. So, what I want you to do after this video is leave a comment, 2 to 3 sentences. Assume for now, work means schoolwork. So just for now, just for this comment, for this video, I want you to assume that your work is school for the moment. Which false view of work, avoidance, endurance, necessary hindrance, is most tempting to you? I do not mean this is something that you slip into all the time, but which one of them is the most tempting to you and why? Tell me why. Which one of these is the most tempting? So don't forget to read. If you've made it this far, you've already watched. And don't forget to write that half-page reflection on why do you want to work. Love you guys. Enjoy your week.